This entry in the Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars role-playing series is going to look at experience points. And people have been requesting this video for quite a while, and I've started and stopped a few different versions of it. But, well, here it is. Of all the things, of all the sections in the rules for this game, when I first got it and read it, the one that surprised me most about its vagueness and incompleteness was experience points. I thought there must be a section somewhere else in this book that I've missed, something I've overlooked, or maybe something in one of the printed adventures which explains what was intended for the experience point rules, and there isn't. The rules are what they intended, and they are quite vague. Meaning that those of us who come from older games or who've been playing longer, who've grown used to the idea of having to make rulings in the absence of rules, we can feel empowered to go ahead and figure out for ourselves what's the best way to approach this. But for people for whom this is their first game ever, it's a little daunting perhaps, or even like, how do I begin? Where do I begin? And it's to those people really that this video is addressed. What it explains in the experience points section is that for a typical session, and it doesn't really define what a typical session is, which is good, but it does get at the idea that a typical session includes a certain number of major and minor events. Okay, so if you come to see the typical session as comprising that number of major and minor events, then it doesn't really matter how long the session is. It doesn't matter if you play for 1 hour or 6 hours or somewhere in between. What matters is, what did the characters experience? And these are experience points. What has happened to them that would cause change? This is success. This is failure. This is encountering mystery. This is uncovering a new villain, or resolving a conflict with a villain from the past, and so on. These are major and minor life-changing experiences. It's not simply the passage of time. There is no reason to award experience points based on the passage of time. There's no real reason to award experience points for just showing up. The reason why experience points get awarded is for major and minor events in a sequence that have some effect on the character. So, for that typical session, the rules describe assigning a certain number of experience points, plus offer some suggestions for bonus points. So, the base suggestion is 10 experience points per typical session. Now let's take a step back. This means if you ran a typical session, you would expect to give out 10 experience points. If you ran a session on your normal day, but it didn't reach the level of the defined typical session of a few major events and some minor events, then conceivably you would give out fewer than 10 experience points. If something beyond a few major and minor events take place, something serious like the change in a character's obligation, the resolving that, defeating a villain, overcoming a major threat, escaping from the Empire, something really big, something where they risked death, something where they failed horribly and overcame that failure, something where significant events happened, you could conceivably give more experience points. So really what we're looking at is a range of 0 to 10 for less than typical up to typical, and around 10 to 15 for more than typical. This is the number of experience points that are basically recommended. But recommended for what? They're recommended as an experience point award for the end of a session. What if you're just playing a one-shot? Do you need to worry about experience? What if you're only going to be playing 3 sessions? Or what if these characters are just for one printed adventure? Well, in the printed adventure aspect, they have you covered. They give experience point suggestions in those. And if you're playing Age of Rebellion, they also handle things like duty, rewards, and awards. So it's just your own games that you need to worry about, and how long you conceive of them running. Are you going to be running a limited campaign? Do you have a set number of sessions in mind? Are you going to be running an open-end campaign like we're doing that just goes on and on? How many experience points you award matters in that context. It's in this area of defining specifics for these different contexts that I think readers can be excused for finding the experience points awards section of the core rules to be vague. They really don't talk about it. They put it in your hands. I feel that the average experience point award for the typical session, setting it around 10, works for most cases. If you're just doing a one-shot, or if your group just plays from time to time, experience points don't really matter. If you're going to be doing a limited run, some kind of story arc, or you've planned to do 10 sessions or something, then you'll want to see some sort of progress in your character. A benchmark of 10 experience points or more will allow you to do that. As starting characters, each time they're allowed to spend experience points, they will be able to raise skills, they'll be able to buy talents. They don't have to worry about raising their characteristics because they can't. For a long-term campaign where there may be some worry in the group that some sort of sweet spot will be surpassed, that characters will become too capable, then again, knowing that I shouldn't give more than 10 experience points per session unless something really spectacular happens is another good benchmark. At the beginning, when they are new characters, they will still be able to raise some skills and they'll be able to buy some talents, but this will slowly drop off. As they become more capable, the costs are rising as well, and they'll be able to purchase things less often. So, in contrast to this vagueness that we find in awarding experience points, we have very detailed specifics about how to build characters. We know exactly how much things cost, where the points can go, and to what limit things can be raised. We know that the characteristics, the brawn, the agility, the intellect, and so on, these can only be raised with experience points during character creation, and that any subsequent increase of those traits will have to wait until you get all the way down to the bottom of a specialization tree in your career to get the dedication talent. Without that, those traits are not improving. So all of your earned experience points is going into talents and it's going into skills. But there's absolutely no advice given about buying these things in terms of, is there some kind of limit on how many you can buy? So that's where the Game Master has to step in again, sit down with the group and figure out what is going to satisfy and interest people in terms of improving their characters. Now, just a few seconds ago, I touched on one more concept which is left in your hands. This is the idea of when can characters be improved? When can experience points be spent to improve the character? There is talk about training. There is talk about teachers and mentors, particularly when we get to the rules in Force and Destiny. However, what we don't have is something like experience points are spent during downtime between adventures. It's entirely possible that you're not running the sort of game that has something that's distinctly styled like an adventure. You might be running Edge of the Empire, and it's one job blending into another job and things going wrong. Things just don't go smooth, to use a Firefly reference. And there never really seems to be a break in anything where someone could go away or get a moment's rest to train and learn something new. In many cases, it feels like they should be learning from experience. Well, all of that is true. It's not like Age of Rebellion, where you're sent on a sortie or sent on some kind of mission and then extracted, brought home, and given some time to recuperate, maybe given some special mission-oriented training. It's left in your hands. What makes sense for your campaign? So to use a real-world example, in our campaign, we started out with clearly defined contracts which had beginnings and ends, and this led to a very easy to insert period of downtime. People worked together for a period of time, got annoyed with each other, separated for a while, and then came back together for another job. And while they were away, they, got in trouble. They worked in other jobs. They maybe took some training, etc., etc. They came back. Experience points had been spent in this break between clearly defined contracts in Edge of the Empire, and this worked fine for quite a while. However, things started to change in the campaign where there was a lot more travel of longer distance. There was periods inside the bounds of the contract or inside the bounds of what the characters were doing where there was plenty of downtime for skills to be improved. And so we shifted away from this only spending experience points during a clearly defined period of outside of gameplay downtime into whenever there's time, if you have experience points available and there is justification for improvement, go ahead and spend them. So it's a more natural progress where even during the course of a story, characters might be learning new things because weeks might be passing between two sentences, right? And you jump from this planet to that planet and 2 weeks pass, right? Experience points might be spent there. Experience points might be spent in a specific journey to meet a mentor or teacher or trainer. Right. Having your pool of experience points available to be used at that time when you receive the training, being able to gloss over an intervening period of time spent training is handy. So these are decisions that you make as the runner of the game in concert with the tastes of the people who play it. It can be particularly annoying to meet a trainer and do a long training montage and then at the end of that not actually learn anything because you don't have any experience points in reserve to spend and you have to wait until you've earned more to spend on what you learned then. So this kind of thing needs to be considered. Now in Force and Destiny, new rules were introduced to allow partial learning, which are kind of interesting, where you can invest an amount of experience points less than the total cost of buying a new skill or ability and having it manifest sometimes at an appropriate opportunity or scene to less than perfect results. A great example of this from the films is Luke hanging upside down in the ice cave, right? And he's reaching for his lightsaber and he succeeds, but clearly the power of move is something he's going to master later after he starts spending time under the tutelage of Yoda on Dagobah. So that's another way to approach things, slowly allowing experience points to be allotted to skills that haven't been purchased yet, and from time to time allowing those skills to enter play. The next part to think about is how many experience points can be spent on a particular thing. What I mean is, can a skill be raised by more than one level at a time? Could you start and play through a few sessions with a rank of 1 in ranged light, earn some experience points, and then the next time you play show up with a 3 in ranged light? Is that okay? Well, is it? If you're fine with that, if you don't mind this rapid leap toward the cutoff point of 5, then there's really no reason why that can't happen. It's certainly not my preference. You can probably tell from the tone of my voice that that's not how I would want to do it. I would want the progress in the hard skill to progress a little more naturally, incrementally, one at a time. But I also think of open-ended campaign play as the default. Whenever I think about sitting down to play a game with someone, I'm thinking about the years-long campaign. I'm not really thinking about 4 or 5 sessions. If we were to play 4 or 5 sessions, then I would definitely want to see faster improvement in iconic skills linked to that character. The other reason to think about not allowing multi-level jumps in skills from session to session is that it tends to produce characters which can only do that thing. We wind up with very hyper-specialized characters which may not in the end be satisfying or allow for as broad an array of contract types or mission types or quests or adventures that you, the group, are interested in. The characters become pigeonholed in the skills in which they've sunk a lot of points. So by actually putting a limit on skills, saying, every time we have a chance to raise or improve characters, let's justify some things. Let's only allow skills to increase by 1 level per justified improvement. You might even want to attach that to receiving specific training or having some kind of specific and significant experience tied to it. Maybe to increase a knowledge score, they need to have a lot of experience working in that field, or they need to receive formal training. Maybe to raise a combat score, they need to get involved in a series of combats where they learn something about the application of that skill, either in success or in failure, and so on. This can help produce characters with a broader base of capabilities, because we tend not to have too many hoarders of experience points in the community. They're out there, but generally speaking, we improve the character as much as we can when we have the opportunity. If we're not allowed to shoot particular skills up to the maximum as fast as we can, then we have to build a broader base, which allows for different types of action within the game. And it also allows for synergy between characters. This is one of those games where there is a helping mechanic. There are mechanical benefits in the system for characters assisting each other. And they get much better if both characters have at least some grounding in the skill that's being attempted. So, there you go. That's skills. What about talents? Talents are arranged in a tree. They have ascending costs. It's very easy to figure them out. This works exactly the same way for force powers. They're in trees, and the different types of powers have different costs. So, using your vaunted role-playing gamer math skills, you can very quickly figure out that at a specific rate of experience points, there's a certain number of talents which could conceivably be bought anytime that people were allowed to do so. Do you want to require training or put some other kind of limit on how these talents are acquired? These talents really are the way that the careers and their specializations are expressed in the game. What makes your smuggler feel like a smuggler, or what makes your heavy or hired gun feel that way, really comes from the talents, less so than the skills. I mean, yes, you need the skills to support what your character is doing, but what makes them distinct are the talents within the specialization trees. How quickly should those be appearing, and why are they appearing? Are they appearing from the natural predilection of that character for that career, or are they an expression of tools of the trade that have been learned? Or does it depend on the talent? All these are things that you can think about. Talking about how characters are going to be improved is good. It's good practice. It's not something to run away and do quietly and then reveal when you get to the next session. This is a part of how the characters are responding to the events in their lives, the events in the campaign or in the story that they're being moved through. How characters are improved by players is our way of representing how character ability, how character, how personality evolves as the result of experience. This is definitely a part of the management of the game, and the management of the game is one of those responsibilities that is a part of the game master's job. Which doesn't mean they have control over how your character develops. It means that they have a vested interest in understanding how you are developing the character. They need to have information about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what skills you'd like to be able to use, how you'd like your character to be growing in play, how you want your character to be perceived. Right? All of these things, they work together. What is your character known for? What is your character's career known for? How do you rate compared to others in that career? Are you an up-and-comer? Are you developing rapidly? Are you a natural talent? Right? Luke Skywalker is a farm boy when we first meet him, and not long afterward is flying a very expensive fighter craft in a major military operation. How does this happen? Was he a pilot before? Yes, we clearly know that he was. His T-16 is sitting behind him in the garage as he's falling in love with a hologram of Princess Leia. He clearly has these skills, but he's definitely not of that career, and then he is. How quickly do you want this progression to happen? How often do you want it to happen that quickly? Are there certain exceptions? Are there certain times and tides that make changes in how you do things? Right. So this is an overview of experience. From my point of view, for long-term campaign play, I recommend keeping to a 1 level change for skills, not worrying too much at how quickly talents are acquired, and assigning around 10 experience points per session. If it's particularly dangerous, if it's particularly threatening, important, or character affecting, personality and background affecting, then consider giving more, maybe 5 points. If you practically kill them, if their nemesis crushes them and scatters them to the 4 corners of the galaxy, you might consider going even higher than 15. Keep it rare. No. Less than 10 in long-form campaign play would recommend a session where the characters pretty much chose to do nothing. For short-term games, do some calculation. Actually take a look at the careers, the specializations that the characters are going to be running, and figure out, if you've got this planned story arc, what are they going to need to be able to do by certain points within that story arc. Do the math and figure out what the average award should be. If they do everything right, what's the average award they're going to get? If things get really hairy, how much more should you give them? If they do nothing, how much less, including 0. And that's it, really. Understanding how many points you're comfortable assigning, understanding how many points the group is satisfied with for allotting to things they can spend it on, and figuring out, at least in general, how quick progression is going to be as a result is all you need to know. And this is going to be different from game to game, and so in the core book, they give us the gift of vagueness. They explain what an average experience point allotment is, and they leave the rest for you to define in terms of the specifics of your game. If you would like to talk about this topic further, please engage me in the comments or Facebook or G+, what have you. I look forward to hearing from you.